Welcome to part two of the Prelude to the Revolution. Now we're going to take a look at the Imperial crisis of the British Empire. American nationalism was born out of a political revolution against England that took place during the years of 1763 to 1776. Now those 2 years are actually pretty important. 1763, if you remember, was the year that they signed the Treaty of Paris of 1763 that ended the 7 Years' War. And 1776 should be familiar, that is the year that the colonists declared independence, right? Now, when we take a look at that time frame, in 1763, the relationship between the colonies and the Crown and Parliament is way up here. They love the king. He's great. He just fought a war for us to get that Ohio River Valley that we wanted so bad, and he did it. He fought it. He spent the money. He's number one on our speed dial. We friended him on our Facebook, right? We laugh at all his jokes, even though they're not funny, right? We absolutely love the king. That's 1763. But that relationship is going to quickly deteriorate to the point that by 1776, we've blocked him on Twitter, right? We hate the king. We don't want to have anything to do with him. We want to go it alone. So we have to get from there, way up here, right? We love him, to down here, we hate him, and we need our own nation. And that process from getting from one to the other is called the Imperial crisis of the British Empire. So this all begins with the aftermath of the 7 Years' War, right? Now, you remember the British Empire grew vastly as a result of that Treaty of Paris. Matter of fact, it more than doubled in size. Whereas before you had these territorial holdings around Hudson Bay, and you had this thin strip of colonies all the way out to the Appalachian Mountains on the Atlantic coast. Now all of a sudden you've got land that spans all the way to the east bank of the Mississippi River. You've got Florida, you've got Canada. You got to figure out how to administer all of this stuff, right? And at the same time, you also amassed a tremendous amount of debt. So this is the two problems that the British Empire is faced with. A massive amount of new land to deal with, and a massive amount of debt that needs to be paid. So the response, well, first of all, they decide we need to reorganize and gain effective control of our colonies, right? New and old alike. Now remember, up to this point, their colonies, the way they've handled them was a policy of benign neglect. As long as the raw materials keep flowing into British industries back in England proper, they'll pretty much leave the colonies alone to do what they please and administer themselves how they please. But now that this empire, this colonial empire, has grown so vastly, this is no longer a logical way to administer your colonies. So they're going to figure out how to administer the new territory, but they're going to need to get control of the old ones as well. Right? And secondly, since those colonies are the ones that are going to gain the most benefit from this war, it only seems reasonable that the colonies should bear some of the burden of that debt that was built up. Englanders in England proper are going to have to pay some of this as well, but they say that the colonies should have to pay too. Now, a couple things to be perfectly clear. First of all, it's important to note that the colonies at no time ever said that they shouldn't have to pay, right? They will from the very beginning say, yes, we understand and we agree we should have to pay some of this debt. The disagreement will come to how that money is accumulated, right? Secondly, from both perspectives, the actions and reactions by the British government and the British colonists make absolute sense from their point of view. We'll see as we walk through this here, as the British take different actions, as the Parliament and the King take different actions to try and achieve these two aims you see here. From their point of view, it makes absolute rational sense what they're doing, right? And so imagine how shocked they are when they get this incredible hostile response from the colonists. But from the colonists' point of view, they see this as an intrusion, and their perspective, it makes absolutely sense how they react to it as well. We'll see this as we go through it. And we can really see a good example of this when we take a look at the very first thing that the king and the parliament does, and then it's trying to reorganize the land, right? They've acquired all this new territory, right, from the French, but this territory they acquired is not just an open, vast, unoccupied land, right? There's already people that live there. Of course, there are some Frenchmen that live in these territories, but there's also the Native Americans, right? And so what the British government does not want to have to do is doesn't want to have to worry about Englishmen pouring into all this newly acquired territory unchecked, ultimately leading to skirmishes with the locals, the Native Americans, in which then they would have to send troops because it is the responsibility of the king, of course, to protect its people, right? You don't want to keep having to throw troops in this new area. Remember, you're trying to cut costs. You got all this debt from the war. So the very first action they take is they basically make that new land acquired off limits. The Proclamation of 1763 is a measure taken by Parliament and the king in order to basically hold off on expansion into this newly acquired territory until they can figure out what to do. What the proclamation says, it says, as where it is just and reasonable and essential to our interest and security of our colonies, that the several nations and tribes of Indians with whom we are connected and who live under our protection, right, because it's our territory now, right, should not be molested or disturbed in the possession of such parts of our dominion and territories as not having been ceded or purchased by us, and are reserved to them. No governor or commander-in-chief of any of our established colonies or plantations in America do presume, for the present, and until our further pleasure is known, to grant warrants to survey or pass patents on any lands beyond the head sources of any of the rivers which fall into the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so what does that mean? What it means is that these established colonies who are just chomping at the bit to pour in the Ohio River Valley cannot pass the crest of the Appalachian Mountains. For now. It says, for the present, right? So from the British king and the Parliament, this makes absolute sense. It's like, look, we got to get this reorganized. We got to get this figured out. So for now, we don't want you pouring in there where we might have to send people to protect you. Okay? But the colonists are absolutely dumbfounded by this. It's like, well, what was the point? We fought a war to get this Ohio River Valley. That was the whole genesis of this. And now that we got it, you say we can't go there? Well, then why do we fight the war? We fought a war to make an Indian preservation? I don't think so. It doesn't make any sense, right? And so you see that disconnect between the two groups, right? Now, additionally, the English, the crown decides that because they're going to need to make sure that you don't have squatters slipping over and going into this territory, they make the decision that they need to maintain a permanent military force in the colonies, albeit reduced compared to the war itself, in order to make sure that all of these new rules are enforced. Remember, they're trying to reorganize everything. Now, again, for the crown, this makes a lot of sense, right? We need to make sure that this reorganization works. So we need to make sure that we have the authority in place to make sure that it is enforced. But again, to the colonists, this is an affront. It's like, oh, I see. And now you're going to keep a permanent military force here because you don't trust us. Because up to this time, it's always been just our own militias that have handled things, but not anymore. So again, both sides are having a seemingly rational response to the issues that are being presented to them, but they are running directly contrary to each other.